The whole idea that I'm bitter and angry is, of course, something started in the papers.
Yeah.
And as you know, they make stuff up all the time. It isn't until you've been involved with the British press that you realise how utterly dishonest they are and how they would just invent stuff. No, there have been moments when I feel annoyance, when I pack to fly for the umpteenth time and hear that my ex-wife is going on safari. I kind of think this isn't very fair. But actually, I'm in very good spirits. The travelling, because when you have a large earning requirement, you know, to take care of the animal, the problem is that I can't do writing very much, because writing is not very well paid, although it's much harder than acting, and far fewer people can do it. So that means that I basically have to perform to earn the money that I need, and that means I have to travel, and it's the travelling that's tiring, not the performing.
And you enjoy being on stage again?
I love it because it's very real, and you see, for about 35 years, from about 1966, when I started with David Frost and the two Ronnies, through Python and then through Fawlty Towers, and then a lot of movies and quite a lot of television, I was basically on one screen or another until about 5 or 6 years ago. And then someone invited me to New Zealand out of the blue and said, why don't you come and do a show in New Zealand? And I just had a bit of a row with two Hollywood studios, because I'd written with a friend of mine called Kurt D'Amico 2 very good scripts, and people who didn't know what they were doing started telling me to alter the script in a way that I knew would make it worse. And that's pretty infuriating when you spent 40 years writing and the people telling you what to do have never written anything, you know? So the opportunity of doing a show of my own was great, because it meant that I could do whatever material I liked and nobody was going to tell me. So that's how it all started.
Yeah.
But I was hired by them to do something. In one case, it was a Roald Dahl book called, oh God, I've gone blank on the name, I'll think of it in a second. And it was absolutely one of my favorite books. I used to read it to my daughter. The Twits, it was called. And I was really pleased with the script, and we did a second draft, and we screwed up a couple of scenes at the beginning, but the ending was much better, and they had been raving about our work. And the next thing we heard is they were talking to other writers. And you realize it's not that they have no idea what they're doing, but they have no idea that they have no idea what they're doing. You see, if they thought we don't understand scripts, so we'll give it over to someone who does, that wouldn't be a problem. But when they don't understand script and then start trying to control the script, it's a disaster. One of the almost, what can I say, relaxing things you can do as a comic sometimes is to watch a lot of the old comedy films, and you will find that the greatest comics made a fair number of duds. Or, even in the good films, there are scenes that aren't so good. In other words, comedy is so difficult to do at the top level that there's always going to be a fairly high amount of failure. But there are some people who will have more success and less failure than others, and the more you know about what you're doing, the more success you'll have by and large. But you'll always have stuff that doesn't work. This is a kind of professional autobiography. You see, people in England are very nostalgic for the times of great television. I said to my greatest friend, I met him second day at Cambridge. He's almost exactly my age. I think he's a year younger, 70. And he said he doesn't watch television anymore in England because it's just crap. Now, that's obviously too broad. There's a small number of good things, but our television used to be the best in the world. When I had American friends visiting, I would say one night, just stay at home and watch the television, and you'll be amazed at how good it is. You can't say that anymore, you know, and it's sad.
Do you think that's true, or do you think it's just that you remembered the good stories?
No, it's true.
Of
course, the people working in television now will always defend it and pretend that it's good, but compared with what it was, it's very poor these days, very, very poor. We used to have an enormous number of good scripted programs, very skillful script writers, excellent actors. Now, the first thing that most young executives want to do is to get rid of talent. They want to, because they have to pay for talent, and they want to bring people in who have no discernible talent at all. And then, if the show works, the person who thought of the idea of the show, i.e. the executive, will get the credit. Now, nobody gets the credit for Fawlty Towers. Nobody knows that Jimmy Gilbert commissioned it. Nobody knows that John Howard David directed it. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
Because in those days, they were happy for the people who wrote and performed to do it. And now I think that there's so little good written comedy. There's a little bit, but not very much. The skill in terms of structuring the script just isn't there anymore. There's lots of good performers and very good stand-up, but so far as scripted comedy is concerned, is probably 30% of what we used to have that's really good.
Yeah. Why do you think it's gone that way? Why do you think people don't trust?
Because when they brought in lots and lots of channels, the audience got fragmented, and that meant that people couldn't afford programs so much. And then that meant that people were looking for cheap programs, and they went further and further down market, just like the British newspapers, which I think are just about as bad as any papers in the world. It was fundamentally intelligent. People went into television not to make large quantities of money, because they thought it was a very honourable thing to do. And it's astonishing in retrospect, they were much less interested in the income than the status. Now, as Tony J pointed out to me, everyone who makes a lot of money out of television doesn't make good programs, because making good programs costs it takes a lot of time. If you want to make a lot of money in television, you want to find a sort of program you can make 3 of in an evening. I think it will be very hard to do, because one of the problems with a big success like Fawlty Towers or even Python is that it makes it very hard to follow, because you set the bar so high that even if you do something that's almost as good, people will remember the old thing as being better than it was, and so they'll say, well, it's very good, we like it, but it's not as good as, and that means it's hardly worth doing. I suddenly, after Fawlty Towers, I began to feel a little sorry for Orson Welles, who made Citizen Kane when he was 25, and for the rest of his quite long life, everyone said, very good, Orson, but not as good as Citizen Kane. It's strange. People find it hard to believe this is true, but performing is not very important to me. And during periods of my life, a couple of times I've had absences from performing. There was a stage just after I married Connie when for 18 months I hardly performed at all. I was totally happy just writing. The acting bit is very, very demanding, particularly on Fawlty Towers, where there was so much to learn. We had to learn 140 pages of dialogue every week. And if I showed any of your viewers 140 pages and said, you've got to know this by this time next week, they would think, poof. Then you've got to learn all the actions as well, and all the motivations and how you're going to do every moment. So the problem about making Fawlty Towers was just, because we did 140 pages and most sitcoms do 65, there was just an immense amount to learn, and I was always looking at the watch. I always felt we were under pressure to get it done. And by Tuesday I knew exactly where we had to be in terms of rehearsal. If we'd had a longer turnaround time, it could have been much more fun to do. And actually, once we did have it, it was rather ironic, but something happened on one of the sets. A rigger, someone who put the sets up, got in an argument with an executive, and the executive hit him. And everything was stopped for a week because there was a strike. So we'd already rehearsed the show. The next week, we went in to do the show, but we were able to rehearse it for a second week, and all the actors could appear in the second week. They didn't have other work except for one. We had to replace one. And it was such a joy to become really familiar with the material and really relax with the material. It was one of the best shows we ever did. It was the one when Basil pretends he's forgotten Sybil's anniversary.
Right. Oh, yes.
The Wanda musical is still on the cards. One of the reasons that we've been delayed is that MGM, as you know, was in a terrible mess. Nobody knew who was going to buy it. And now a couple of people have bought it who are apparently, according to my spies, extremely decent and reasonable human beings. And as a result of that, a deal has been done, because it was very hard doing a deal with the previous lot of people. So now that a deal has been done with MGM, I'm going to be meeting a guy in New York in December. That's the earliest the two of us get together. He's going to put the money up. Meanwhile, we are looking for a director. But I have already written the book with my daughter Camilla.
Yeah.
And we handed that in almost a year ago, but the musical's taken an enormously long time to put together. It's like the gestation period of an elephant. And somebody told me the average is about 7 years, so I'm just being patient. But the most important thing is that when it happens, it should be good, and that means getting the right people. And very frequently you have to wait for the right people, because the right people are usually busy.